Douglas Carswell. Douglas is a long-term friend of mine. I think we first met a little over 20 years ago. We have since been on something of a long march. We've always believed this country would be better off as an independent country, trading with Europe, but governing ourselves. And that long march has taken us through two parties, the Conservative Party, which I left this time last year, Douglas a little before. And just as I think everyone in this hall, we have found our way sooner or later to the UK Independence Party as the party that is going to fight to get our independence back as a nation. Now, last year, Douglas led the way. He left the Conservative Party. He stood for UKIP in a by-election. He won that by-election, and then I followed him from this stage last year. It was, though, something additional Douglas did that I, alas, was not able to achieve. But not only did we first time win parliamentary seats at by-elections, but Douglas went on to hold his seat as a UKIP MP at the general election. Douglas, congratulations, thank you, and welcome.
I stood on this spot exactly a year ago. I had just joined UKIP and called a by-election. Looking around today, I see lots of familiar faces. People who came to help in that election. People who came to help in the general election that followed. So I wanted to begin by saying a real heartfelt thank you. Thank you for all that you did in the by-election and in the general election that followed. I couldn't have done it without you. It wasn't my victory. It was your victory. It was UKIP's victory. We could not have got a staggering 4 million votes at the last general election without your hard work. You know, all that campaigning over the past year, I'm sure you'll agree, it can be quite an experience. You can get to see quite a lot of human nature in all its rich tapestry. Let me tell you about this one day. I was out campaigning in one of the smarter parts of my constituency. Lots of very big, grand Victorian houses. Sweeping wide lawns, long gravel drives. Well, I walked up one of those long gravel drives to the front door of this particularly large house. The front door, I noticed, was slightly open ajar. I could hear the sound of music coming from inside. So I knocked, and I waited. No answer. I knocked a bit louder. Again, no answer. Eventually, this sort of head bobbed around the edge of the door, a young lad in his teens peering up at me. He was wearing, I noticed, a smoking jacket, several sizes too big, with the sleeves rolled up. And he had in his chubby little fingers a cigar. And in the other hand, he had a glass of what looked suspiciously to me like a glass of brandy. And so I said to him, "Are Mum and Dad at home?" He said, "Does it ruddy look as if Mum and Dad are at home?" What's it like being UKIP's only Member of Parliament, I'm often asked. Now, I might be UKIP's only MP, but being an MP for UKIP is so much more fun than being a Conservative. For a start, our meetings of the Parliamentary Party are pretty short. We have unanimity most of the time. But you know, I really do wish we had more MPs in the chamber. It can be immensely frustrating. You know, sitting there on the green benches, I find myself surrounded by a sea of Scottish nationalist MPs. We got 3 times more votes than they did, and yet there are 50-something of them and only 1 UKIP MP. How can that possibly be fair? We got more votes than the Lib Dems, Plaid Cymru, the Ulster Unionists and the Green Party combined. I know how unfair our political system in this country can be. I sit next to it every day in the chamber. Politics is a cartel. The rules have been rigged to remove the threat of choice and competition from the insiders in Westminster. You know, there's a mood of real restlessness out there amongst the voters. Nearly 4 million people voted for us. Tens of thousands of comrades voted for Comrade Corbyn. There's real anger at the injustices of a corporatist economy out there, simmering away below the surface. There's a mood of resentment directed against the political cartel in Westminster. Now, the Europhiles, they'll smear and jeer. They'll claim that UKIP is a rejection of the modern world. We're not. Far from rejecting modernity, modernity has made the emergence of UKIP as the third force in British politics possible. Instead of implying that there is something wrong with the voters for feeling disaffected, we need to ask what is wrong with our political system. Now, historically, the established parties in this country used to represent particular sectional interests, and there's no shame in that. That's a very honourable thing to do. Labour, as the name implies, used to traditionally represent the sectional interest of organised labour. The Conservatives, the sectional interest of business and landowners. Today, the only sectional interest that those once great parties represent is that of career politicians. Far from ensuring that voters get a choice, cartel parties diminish voter choice. And let me tell you how. They select the same sort of candidates, drawn from the same narrow backgrounds, with the same outlook. Too many trod the same path from special advisor to safe seat, from backbench toadying to frontbench blandness. MPs becoming MPs by working in the offices of MPs. It's a cosy club. Of course, there are good people in all parties. I know lots of people on both sides of the House of Commons who are full of good intentions, who are good, decent people. But if you only ever follow the whips through the voting lobby, how can you ever know that you are doing the right thing? You can't. Westminster encourages groupthink. And it's groupthink that has run this country for too many years and has run it into the ground. It was group thinking about banking and credit before 2007 that helped cause the financial crisis. The single biggest driver of income inequality in Britain today, and you don't need to be a Corbynista to recognise that there is growing income inequality, the single biggest driver of it is a monetary system that has artificially driven up the value of assets. This has widened the gap between the haves and the have-nots. At the heart of the capitalist system, it is now central bankers who fix the price of capital. That's not the free market. That's called crony corporatism. Then there's the groupthink that leads to the adoption scandal. Groupthink means that more and more forced adoptions are happening, hidden from public view. More and more grandparents find that their grandchildren are taken off them by force. Secrecy in the family courts, expert evidence unchallenged, both establishment parties unwilling to change things. None of them is willing to end the blanket secrecy of the family courts. Mr. Cameron, you should allow the experts' evidence to be published. And then, of course, it's groupthink that took us into what became the European Union all those years ago. And it's the groupthink of Westminster that keeps us there. It's groupthink that made them believe that we should join the exchange rate mechanism in the 1990s. It's groupthink that has tied us to the world's only declining trade bloc. It's groupthink that means they cannot see that our future prosperity depends on being able to trade with the 93% of people on this planet who do not reside inside the EU. We need to leave the EU. We need political reform to break the cartel, to end the groupthink that is holding this country back. And that means, number one, a proper right of recall. Local voters must be able to trigger by-elections. They must be able to decide who represents them in Parliament and sack them if they don't do their job. I don't know why so many of my colleagues in the House of Commons are so worried about by-elections. I happen to love them, but... We also need electoral reform to abolish the idea of the safe seat altogether. This is at the heart of the problem. I am so pleased to see Katie Ghosh from the Electoral Reform Society here today. I was a supporter of electoral reform while I was still a Conservative. I sponsored meetings of the Electoral Reform Society before I joined UKIP. Katie, it's an honour to have you here with us today. Thank you. What kind of electoral reform system do we need? Well, it's not up to me. It's going to be for you to decide. But I'd simply say this. The first-past-the-post system we have today is not a long-standing British tradition. Like so many things that we think of as ancient, integral parts of the way that we're governed, it turns out to be a late Victorian invention. Until the 1880s, we didn't have first-past-the-post in this country. We had a system of first-to-past-the-post. Most constituencies were represented by 2 MPs in Parliament. Having 2 MPs meant more choice and more competition. It was only in the 1880s, around the time they gave the ordinary working man the vote, they had to devise a monopolistic electoral system so they could control who the working man might elect. We need to recognise that if UKIP is to win, we need to be a force for change. And in order to carry a convincing message of change, we have to radiate optimism. A belief that tomorrow is going to be better than today. Optimism is infectious. The world is getting better. Yes, there are lots of things about the cartel economy and the corporatist political system that we don't like. But that's why we're here, because we're in a party that wants change. Most people in this country are living longer, healthier, happier lives than ever before. Infant mortality is not only falling in sub-Saharan Africa, it's declined dramatically in this country too. Yes, people are right to be concerned about crime. Knife crime in my Clacton constituency remains stubbornly high, but overall violence is in decline. There's less binge drinking amongst the younger generation now than a decade ago. Diseases that we could only manage a generation ago can now be cured. Britain is a more tolerant and open society today than ever before. Let's never blame outsiders for the problems caused by political insiders in Westminster. Technology is giving us greater choice and opportunities than seemed imaginable even a few years ago. Blockchains and other innovations are about to open up a whole new world of possibilities. But you know, there's one great stonking, thudding reason why UKIP should be cheerful above all of that. We are finally getting the in-out referendum that we've been fighting for. There are many in this room who deserve a medal for what they've done over the years. David Cameron said we couldn't have a referendum. He's changed his mind, and it's down to the efforts of many people here in this room. The only question that now counts is how do we win? It'll all be worthless if we don't now win the referendum. Everything we do must be about winning the referendum. And we need to put our country first. This isn't a case of who's going to win democratic elections. This is about whether we remain a self-governing democracy at all. We must be prepared to work with anyone, left or right, politician or undecided, all backgrounds, all faiths, all colours, all people. There are good, honourable, patriotic members of all parties. We must work with them all. It's not enough to win by offering opposition to Brussels. Our challenge is to show how Britain can prosper outside the EU. It's an enormous honour to have joined UKIP a year ago. I've made many friends and been incredibly warmly welcomed. Together we have got an enormous referendum battle ahead. Let everything that we do be about winning it. Let's do it. Thank you.